What's up, everybody? Welcome to the High Level Husband Podcast. I'm Tommy McAllister, and today I am super excited about this one. Somebody that needs no introduction, a businessman, a family man. But what I think the thing that draws me to Ryan the most is that he's not a believer in Christ, he's an actual follower in Christ. So, Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, happy to be here, man.
Yeah. Dude, so I first came across you about 2 years ago, and you probably don't even remember what I'm about to share with you, but obviously, you're on social media, I'm on social media, and I started just watching your following grow. But I had a friend of my life who recently moved here about 2 years ago, and it was when Elevation Worship came here. Remember when they did the thing at T-Mobile?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Such a great event. Anyway, so he's like having this like revival in his Christian faith, and so we go to this event, and then he comes back and he's like, dude, I reached out to Ryan Pineda's team to get some one-on-one coaching because he runs a couple of businesses and things like that. And he's like, I told him I had this huge breakthrough at the Elevation Worship concert and all of that. And then I eventually got to email directly with Ryan, and we were messaging, and he said what you said was, hey, man, that's awesome you're interested in coaching with me, but I'm more interested right now at this moment for you just coming to my Bible study. And that's before you were doing like Wealthy Kingdom. It was just like in person. And that really stuck out to me because so many people, right, like it's like, hey, let's get the money, let's do that first. And then, cool, we can disciple you as well.
Yeah.
Let's cash the check first, right? Whereas when he told me that about you, it was like, I don't want to say your status with me, but it was like, this guy's a real one. And so it really stuck out to me, man. So I guess my question for you on that was, has it always been that way? Or was it like this switch that you've just been growing in your faith and maturing in your faith to where you were like, man, like obviously I love business, but I'd rather just disciple men first and foremost, and we'll get to the business aspect of things.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't even remember doing that, so that's funny. And I think that's kind of been my story a little bit too, because people will tell me stories like that, things that happened a long time ago, and be like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that meant so much to you at that point. Another story that makes me think of that is my project manager. His name is Daniel. So he's worked for me for now, man, like 5-6 years. And when he first came to work for me, this was before I even started doing social media at a high level. This was back in like 2018, 2019. You know, I had like 5,000 Instagram followers, and he was like, hey, I want to work for you. Like, people knew me around town as a house flipper. And so I had him come to the office. I was doing an interview, and I was like, tell me about, what you got going on, your life, your family, kids. So he started talking about all this, and then he started talking about faith, because I was already talking about faith like from the beginning. It just has become more pronounced. And, we just started talking, and I go, bro, honestly, I don't think you need to figure out real estate investing. I think you need to get back into church, because he had kind of like fallen off a little bit. And I was like, it just sounds to me like you're pursuing all these things. You're trying to, create financial freedom, and those are all great, but man, you're just neglecting your faith and the things that are important. I was like, what I would tell you is I don't even want you to work for me or learn from me, but I think you need to go first do that, and then let's talk. And then that was what I told him. And literally, like, he still tells to this day, he's like, that made such an impact on my family and my life. And then he eventually did come to work for me and everything else, but like, that was just what I thought he needed to do at that time. And I mean, even for me, it's funny. I just keep coming to more realization as I get older and different things, like more discovery of my own self. Like, I never knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I never knew I was going to be on social media. Like, none of these things were planned. But, I was at Mark Driscoll's office a month ago filming. And he was like, honestly, dude, like, you have a pastor's heart. Like, you are a pastor. And he's like, I think you just do business on the side as a byproduct to fund your ministry and to do the things God's calling you to do. But he's like, but you are a pastor's heart through and through. And he goes, let me ask you this. If you could see somebody get saved versus getting like some massive deal, which one would you pick? I'd be like, someone getting saved. And he's like, exactly. Like, that's the difference. Most people aren't like that.
Dude, that's so powerful, because how many people would choose the other way? And I know, like, as we were talking before this podcast, how like I grew weed for 8 years is because it was almost like the Abraham Isaac moment where God was really testing me to see if I was about that life, right? Which one was. And so I had this financial spot where I was like, hey, I have a mortgage and a wife and all these things. Yeah. Like, I gotta provide for them. But then, like, all I cared about at that moment, other than my family, of course, was just like serving the Lord. Like, I was on fire at that time. lower level of maturity at that time, but then I chose the world, right? And then, Romans 12:2 says, don't conform to the patterns of this world. I did, and I found out the negatives of it. So I love what you're saying. Because I always say, so many people try to fix the exterior to fix the interior, but you can never do that, right? Once you fix the interior, then that is what fixes the exterior, right? Like all that stuff delivers itself. And so that's what I'm really hearing you say with what you were talking about, with Mark Driscoll saying, would you rather have the salvation or the money, right? At the end of the day, that's so amazing, man. So
and we weren't even talking about my salvation.
No,
that's
totally.
already,
Like
I know,
somebody else's,
and that's mine's already secured, and that's the problem most guys have is that they're concerned about their own salvation, which is like good. That's like baby step number one.
Yeah,
you getting saved, but many people, as Paul talks about to the Corinthians, is they still just get stuck drinking milk. They never progress to the next stage where it's like, yo, now we got to go make disciples. This ain't about you anymore. And I just think for me, I've never really like pursued or, obviously I want to make money, but like it's never been the end game. I've been content when we were flipping couches to when we started flipping houses to when I was playing baseball and making no money to today. Like it's not my happiness and my peacefulness has never changed.
That's super interesting because I know, like, specifically for me or other people, right, is usually that's like the maturation process of it. One of my favorite verses is Philippians 4:11-13, where Paul talks about being content, right, no matter the circumstances, right, whether I'm being well-fed or hungry, right, plenty or none. And that took me a while to get to that point, right, where I was always good if I had the plenty or if I was well-fed, right. Now I really feel like I am in that spot of that. So I love that you said that. But it's not most people's journey, right? Like they have to go through it. And I was thinking about this yesterday when I was thinking about you because, going through minor league baseball and doing all of that, I know when I've had sports failures or things like that, we were talking about BMX, when they didn't go my way, I was always frustrated at God, right? Or when the business was struggling, I was frustrated with God. Like, I don't get it. I'm in the Word. I'm discipling men. I'm doing all these things. Why aren't you blessing me? Obviously he needed to fix my heart first. So I would love for you to break down, like, was it from a teen or something that you were just like, you felt like you're all content? Because I would say 99.99999 people are not content.
Yeah.
And that's something they have to learn.
Yeah, and most rich people are not content either, That's why Jesus says it's harder for the rich guy to get into heaven than anyone else. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. The person who has riches and wealth has a harder time. Why is that? Because, number one, they don't even know they have a problem.
Yeah.
Number two, they've got other resources to try and solve the problem and figure out, should I self-medicate? Should I do this? Should I just go to this? Should I try a psychic or some hypnosis thing? Like, dude, people try everything, man. Yeah, and you're in the weed industry. Like, you get it. Yeah. These people, like, they try everything. And so, whereas a poor person or somebody who's in deep distress, who has no other alternative, no resources, all they can depend on is God. And so it's a lot easier for them to surrender. And so I've always thought about that. And like, even for me, I grew up in the church. And so, I've been in church longer than I can ever remember. And so, I grew up reading the Bible. I feel like I've kind of always believed, but it's just always been, a consistent journey to grow even deeper in relationship with Christ. And so, for me, like I said, I was always content, even when I was making $1,200 a month. Like, I didn't feel like a failure. I didn't feel like I was broke. I felt like I was just on the journey to something greater. And even though baseball didn't work out, that mindset still stayed of like, oh, well, I'm flipping my first house. This is the start of something even great. Oh, I'm making my first video, my first podcast. This is the start of something, greater. We just had our first event for Wealthy Kingdom. This is the start of something great. And I think that, when you read Hebrews 11:1 talks about how, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we don't see. And so it's like you're always hoping for the next thing. And, if as long as that hope is rooted in Christ, then you'll always be joyful because you always have hope. There's always something better.
Dude, it's so funny that you mentioned Hebrews right there. Literally, the Bible verse, so we have a whiteboard outside of our kitchen. And so on it, we always put like different Bible verses, and they'll stay there sometimes for a year, just to remind us of different things. And that's the one we put on our whiteboard yesterday.
There we go.
So it's so funny that you say that, right? Because it's the hope, right? The Man's Search for Meaning. I'm sure you've read The Man's Search for Meaning.
No, I haven't actually.
You never read The Man's Search for Meaning? God,
No.
Viktor Frankl. You never heard of Viktor?
I've heard of Viktor Frankl, but
Right.
I've never read it.
Okay, and get the Cliff Notes version. It's a great book.
Yeah,
but there's
yeah.
like a lot of dry spots and then a couple like home runs, right? But then a lot of dry. But that's what he was talking about. He was saying like in the concentration camps, that obviously people were dying from being put to death, but the ones who weren't, that they would die because they would lose hope, and it would always be the day after Christmas or the day after their birthday that this just drastic death rate would go up because they had hope that they were going to make it home by Christmas, and when they didn't, they gave up hope, and when they gave up the hope, that was the final thing that their body just gave out. Obviously, they were malnourished, but if they had that, they had still going because the hope was there.
Yeah.
So their spirit was still alive, but as soon as it broke their spirit of not being home by Christmas, they were gone.
Wow.
And down on that. So, man, that's powerful. I'm so stoked at you. I love those God moments when God says those, like,
Yeah.
you bring up Hebrews, and we just put that on our boards yesterday.
Yeah.
in
He's
those
like,
things.
just memorize it for a long time.
Yeah. And
Meditate
live this
on
out.
it.
Yeah, live this out. Make this a part of your lifestyle.
Yeah.
I feel like you do social media really well, obviously, with all those things, but I just love that you are passionate and bold about on there. Obviously, you mentioned Mark Driscoll's super bold and direct with what he says.
Controversial, yeah.
Yeah, controversial in certain aspects. I feel like I'm that middle ground. I can definitely be controversial on there, and then super loving and things like that as well. But how do you handle, because I know for me personally, growing up the way that I did with like a father wound and being a shy kid and all of that, I always have felt like the need for significance.
Yeah.
And so then once our platform grew and grew and got bigger and bigger, like, I don't want to say I got more callous, but then it would hit the new level, and then the new hate from people that like maybe I either respected or other Christians started coming in. How do you handle that? Is it because of what you were talking about earlier of like, hey, I've always just been content, so it's not that big of a deal? Or does it when people do kind of like throw some shade your way for either your faith or whatever else in your life?
Yeah.
How does that impact you?
I honestly just have never cared. Like, I literally just don't really look at what's going on. We were talking about, like, you'd be amazed at how many things I just am not even aware of. Like a book you mentioned, or like a lot of these pastors I've had and other things. Dude, I just try to focus on just the things that God's calling me to do. And I think it all just stems from just being rooted in the Word. At the end of the day, I was reading Psalms yesterday, and I read Psalms 112 or 112 for those listening. Like, probably my favorite psalm ever. And I didn't even know until yesterday. And, it just talks about how, and it continues from Psalm 111 right before, and it just talks about how, actually, you know what? I'm going to read it for everyone because I think it's so powerful for entrepreneurs and hate, which you're talking about, because obviously I deal with hate, and that's just part of life. That's part of success and everything else. But, at the end of Psalm 111, he says, "Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true wisdom. All who obey his commandments will grow in wisdom." And so I've always thought about that because I don't really read many Christian books. I just read the Bible. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you just fear the Lord and you obey his commands, you will have true wisdom. You don't, and I love all these pastors and everything and all these books, but it's just like, I rather prefer to read the Bible. So, and there's nothing wrong with reading Christian books. I think it's great. But anyways, so Psalm 112, I think this is so great for what you're talking about. "How joyful are those who fear the Lord and delight in obeying his commands. Their children will be successful everywhere. An entire generation of godly people will be blessed. They themselves will be wealthy, and their good deeds will last forever. Light shines in the darkness for the godly. They are generous, compassionate, and righteous. Good comes to those who lend money generously and conduct their business fairly. Such people will never be overcome by evil. Those who are righteous will be long remembered. They don't fear bad news," aka hate. Because they confidently trust the Lord to care for them. They are confident and fearless and can face their foes triumphantly, the haters. They share freely and give generously to those in need. Their good deeds will be remembered forever. They will have influence and honor. And this is where it gets good for the haters. The wicked will see this and be infuriated. They will grind their teeth in anger. They will slink away their hopes and be thwarted. So anytime you think of the haters, just remember Psalm 112.
Yeah. No, for sure. Dude, that is so good because it covers like where we're at, but then it covers with where that you can so see it.
I mean, look at the promises. Your children will be great. You'll be wealthy. You'll be remembered. You'll have influence. You'll have honor. Your haters will get even more mad because they can't do anything. As long as you just do one thing, you just obey the Lord and follow his commands. That's it. That's all you have to do.
It's really so simple at the end of the day. That's why at the beginning when I said that you're not a believer, you're a follower, is that I don't know if you've ever seen that stat, is that there's 64% of Americans right now are believers, are Christians. Only 4% actually follow Christ, like are in the Word, tithe, fast, in a church and community, like all these other things that we're called to do. But how many of them are like, I don't really feel like I need to do that. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs that claim that they're Christians and things like that. And they're like, but I don't think like I really need to be in the Word. Like I'm good just watching church online when I can. And I'm like, dude, like I don't think you understand. But you're reading all these other books, like you're saying, because I love reading other books. But the same thing, like every single day, both of us. I wake up every day to my wife reading the Bible and going to sleep reading the Bible, and same thing. I go to sleep every single night reading it, and it's like my mind gets blown. It's almost like a new book every single time, right? Mm-hmm. You've read it before.
Yep.
It's like it's a different version than God speaks to you. That was going to be one of my questions later on, but I mean, I think you kind of addressed it. Is like, would you say that that's the number one thing that's grows you in life is being in the Word?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people, we all want instant success and change, right? And, I do believe that when the moment you're saved and you're indwelled with the Holy Spirit, you are transformed instantly. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a different process called sanctification that happens that is for those who don't know, it's just this idea that, hey, every single day, your goal should be to become more like Jesus every day. It's this process of becoming more like Jesus. And it's funny because I was having this conversation with another guy on a podcast, and, in business, that's no news to us. It's like we want to get better in business every day. Toyota has a concept called Kaizen, the idea of just improvement, continuous improvement every day. The problem is with Kaizen and everything else we do in life is that if you try to improve the wrong things, you lose. And so sanctification gives you the path on what you're supposed to be improving on. If you try to become more like Jesus every day, the rest will follow into place. You will become a better leader. You'll become a better business person. You'll conduct business more fairly. You'll be a better husband. You don't even need to I don't need to go read the book on how to be a better this or that or this. Just read the main book and become more like Jesus, and the rest will carry it. Because people have asked me that. They're like, dude, how do you become a good leader? Like, you've got great culture. I'm like, I've never read a book on leadership. I just literally haven't. I just read the Bible every day, and I've done that for 8 years straight, every morning without fail. And so you just start to think about the little things adding up. And, one book I have read, The Compound Effect, you read about the compound effect of just how habits keep stacking over and over again. 8 years later, it's like, okay, I'm not able to just call off Bible verses on command when you bring something because all of a sudden I read it once. Mm-hmm. It's from 8 years of doing this.
Yeah. On the days you don't feel like doing, on the days you're tired, you're sick.
I don't feel great every day, but out of obedience, I do it. Mm-hmm. Moses didn't feel great every day for 40 years in the wilderness, but out of obedience, he did it.
Yeah. No, 100%. One of the questions that I have was I love the way you and your wife's relationship is. You can just tell that you guys are two becoming one, and things like, or are two to become one, and all that. And I don't see that with a lot of different entrepreneurial couples. It's like the man's leading the way and he's kind of doing the work, and he can't win at home, right? Like he can win at work, but he can't win at home. Whereas I have always loved what you said. I'm sure you've spoken on this a million times, right? Like how you get off work at 5 o'clock and you always come home and things like that. But I know what transformed my marriage and really made us to like a really high level marriage was our daily disciplines, and it was being in the Word, or it was also, being physically fit and all these other things. And then that became to where I could become followable, whereas before I wasn't followable. When I'm growing weed and all these other things, she couldn't trust my opinion, and honestly, I couldn't trust her. Would you say it's, I guess for people listening, would you say it's the daily disciplines of like being in the Word, doing all these other things, being a person who's content and not basing his decisions on his feelings and emotions, but more on his commitments, that got you and your wife to that spot in your marriage to where you guys really are at today?
Yeah, I think that to your first part about, you weren't a guy that really deserved to be followed, quite frankly, right? And it's true. I said this on stage at the Kingdom Summit, where it's like this idea of submission, people don't even understand like the root meaning of it. Submission means to come underneath, and assist a mission. So most people don't have a mission. It's like, bro, what is she supposed to follow again? What do you do? Like, what are your goals? What's the hope? Like, what kind of hope are you providing again? I wouldn't follow that. Why would I submit to that? You know? And so this idea of submission is assuming you have the right mission to go follow Jesus and do those things. Paul doesn't say, hey, wives, go submit to just your worldly husband who's, being an idiot. He doesn't say that. In fact, he says the opposite. He says, hey, if one is a non-believer and they're not doing things the right way, like, you should stay and try to get them to believe. But look, if they don't want to believe, you can let them go, right? So it's like, people don't want to hear about the hard things that the Bible says in many cases. And so, like, and in that same, a book later in Corinthians, he's just like, dude, you guys still live like the world. You were saved. I was with you. You're still living like the world. You're drinking milk. You're like little babies. And it's like, wow, what a slap in the face. He's like, dude, you still are drinking off your mama's tit. Like, that's what he's saying. You're a baby. It's like, wow. So, I just think that, number one, if you're going to be a man and you're wondering why your wife doesn't follow or listen or anything else, look to yourself first. So I think we both agree on that. Yeah, two, I would say for my wife and I, we were saved before we met, before we got married and everything else. So we both, we're going into marriage with the same theology and all of that. We went through premarital counseling. We got engaged when she was 19, so super early, but we went through premarital counseling and understood what the husband and wife's roles were. We understood that, hey, God's at the head of our marriage, and then it's us. And then eventually when we had kids, that kids would be beneath us. And that is the way that it's supposed to flow. And it just kind of set the right foundation from the beginning. We didn't have to make the mistakes that so many people make because we just kind of had it right from the jump. And it's not that, we've been married over 10 years now. It's not that we've never had problems, but it's like we've definitely avoided a lot of problems and headaches by being somewhat right from the beginning.
Yeah, God's a God of order, right? And
yeah.
I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong and I know we did it, we had premarital sex, which then brought issues into the marriage. And I see so many other people, or I see it in so many couples where due to lack of male leadership or spiritual leadership, the wife becomes the head of the household, right? Out of order, right? And then these problems persist. But I know you said this at the Kingdom Summit was, it's God, marriage, and then kids.
Yeah.
And I know me and my wife, that's one of our first lessons. We always teach couples or men when they come in. We break it into five, a little bit different. It goes God, self, marriage, kids, business. And the only reason self is there, I always have to explain that. It's not like, man, I'm just out drinking beer with the boys and we just doing whatever. It's like, hey, I'm making sure that my spiritual health and my physical health and my mental health is on point. So then when I get to the marriage, I'm overflowing with my cup. Same thing, right? Then when we both do it, then it overflows onto the kids. And then by the time you get to the business, you can't really stress because, man, life is going amazing, right? Like you have the relationship with God. You have
if those four are in line, I'm pretty certain your business is going to be just fine.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's just when it gets out of order, right? Like how many people put business. I get so many people who tell me, they're like, man, I'm just in a season right now. I can't really go to church, or I can't really do this right now. I can't do this. And it's like, man, you're not really serving yourself.
But let me say to the business people too, because this is what the wealthy way is all about and wealthy kingdom and everything else. Like I just see the problem over and over again. To your point, right? It's like so obvious to me that the sequencing is off, but they don't see it, right? But even in business, like let's just talk only about business. I always say sequencing is so important. So for me, let's say I'm going to go try and scale my house flipping business. So what's the sequence at which we need to scale? Well, the first thing we need is more leads. If we don't have more leads, we can't really scale, right? So if I go hire a bunch of sales guys and I don't figure out my lead situation, all of a sudden these guys are just sitting around doing nothing. I just wasted a bunch of money. I got pissed off people because they're not getting leads. We're not getting more deals, even though I got more guys because my sequencing was off, right? And so in business, you got to always do everything in the proper sequence. Okay, great. I'm going to go focus on the marketing first because I got to get more leads. All right, great. Now that that's squared away, let's now focus on sales. Great. Now that that's squared away, let's focus on operations now that we actually have too many sales and too much going on. You don't do it backwards and go beef up your ops thinking all of a sudden that you're going to get all these sales when you don't even know how you're going to get the leads.
Yeah.
But that's what people do. They do everything backwards.
I know. It's crazy, right? I mean, I guess it's hard because we're not of this world and we're living in it. I mean, I guess just from your perspective, who do you think is it because of the media and the world that we live in and it's just getting crazier? Is it because I think, so one of the things Darius Daniels teaches in that book that I was talking about, he says we all have this unique discontent. And typically with things that agitate us are more than likely the problem we're created to solve. And so mine are two. Number one is lukewarm, passive, docile men. And the only reason I say that is because that was me, you know? So like, and so now that's the person I'm created to help. But then the second one is churches who lower the standards to the standards of the members rather than raising the standards of the members to the standards of the church, right?
Yep.
And that frustrates me because it's like, yes, people raise their hand and at the altar call get dunked. And then like what you're saying is they're missing the salvation part of it. I mean, who do you think is it on us individually? Is it on the churches? Why do you think it is the way that you were talking about, where the people are just kind of missing the mark of like the order and things like that, and they just feel?
Well, I think that there's probably a lot of reasons for it. Number one, I don't think we are clearly explaining the benefits of like living a godly life. And like what we're talking about now, it's like, dude, if you just, once again, back to Psalm 111, if you just fear the Lord and obey his commands, you will have true wisdom. And true wisdom is the start of all those other things I said, with wealth, great children, your foes tremble at you. Like, I want all those things. You know, I want to like stomp literally on all my haters. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. King David talks about it all the time, dude. This dude was out destroying his haters. And, you know, for me, it's just like, okay, well, do I actually believe that promise? Do I believe that if I fear the Lord and obey his commands, that all those other things will be given to me? If I do, then I just need to focus on that. And every time I've taught thousands of people business and real estate and everything else, I always try to simplify things. I'm like, what's the one thing you could focus on? Because clearly, to flip a house or run a business requires 8 million steps. So if I have to teach you every little step, okay, this is how you have righteousness. This is how you become a generous person. This is how you become a better husband. This is how you become wealthy and give and tithe, like whatever, right? Dude, that's like a lot of things to worry about. But if I'm like, dude, if you just obey his commands, right? And you just fear the Lord every day, like, can you focus on that every day? Can you just remind yourself to do that? If you do, the rest falls into place, right? And so I always think about that with simplicity. And I think for just so many business people and everything else, they just overcomplicate things, and then they get paralysis analysis, and then they don't know what to do. And so I think the church also does that. I think the church, they have a new sermon every week, and it's about some new topic and whatever the case is. And I think we just forget to re-emphasize the main things.
Yeah, no, so well said, right? Because like we can go to conferences or whatever, and those are great, but how many times people get motivated and they don't go out, which is what I love about the Kingdom Summit. You were like, hey, join the Bible study, start a Bible study, do something like that. In other words, there's something that they can be fed afterwards, because we are going to get filled up, get the motivation, inspiration, but if there's not a plan afterwards, kind of left in the dark, right, of how to actually do this. Whereas like, putting the disciplines in place is so key with just being in the Word. One of the things you mentioned, it wasn't even going to be one of my questions, but you mentioned like tithing, right? And so I think that for many years, I always tithed, but it was always like, hey, like a certain amount. Whether I was killing it or I was struggling, it was the same amount.
Just a flat fee.
Yeah, it was like, I got you this right here, guy. We on auto pay. But as I've grown, right, and just got more into my faith and just really in the Word and realizing what God says. But I had a buddy of mine one time who told me, and he follows, I'm not going to call the guy out on here, so I won't do it, but a really prominent, faith-filled business person who you definitely would know. And that person said, hey, you don't need to tithe because your business is your tithe, because you're growing your business and that's your ministry, so you don't need to tithe. I have my opinions on that. I'm really curious on where you're at, because obviously you're in a position running a big business.
Yeah, I would say, like I said, I don't know who that guy is, but I would say he doesn't know his Bible and he's probably foolish. And here's the thing too, knowing your Bible, like God places a higher standard on people in positions of leadership. And so I would say for that guy, being in a position of leadership, and if he is a believer and he's giving that advice, he's going to be held accountable for that wrong advice. So I would say, number one, be very careful when you decide to become a leader. And if you're going to be a leader for the kingdom, you better freaking know your stuff. So number one, he's wrong. Number two, tithing to me is a lot of things. I'll tell you, like, I'm a believer in the 10% as a minimum. I believe that when you start just getting into details, is it pre-tax, after tax? Like how many times a month? Like, I'm not so concerned with those details. Yeah. Like, once again, give from the heart, right? God loves a cheerful giver. I think that, for me, and I can only speak to my journey, but, tithing is something that, once again, back to when I was making $1,200 a month, I was tithing $120. Now, it would have been easy for me to say, dude, I don't have any money. Like, this $120 is like, it might be whether I eat, this week or not. But I was always faithful that somehow, some way, God would provide. It taught me financial discipline to, even on that, like making that money, I never was in debt, Like I was always frugal and figured out a way and, budgeted and all those things. And, as I started making more money, I had a new test. And it was like, I remember my first deal where I made $25,000. It was like, wow, I got to write a check for $2,500. Like, God, does the church really need this? This is a lot of money, And I remember, like, I had my first internal thing because I thought like that guy too, where it was like, well, what if I reinvest it back into the business and then it can make more and it can make more and it can make more, and then all of a sudden I'll give at the end of the year. It's like, no, okay. Number one, the church needs your money today. Number two, that's just a foolish thing. That's a lack of trust in God, and that's trusting in you, right? So. That was my next test. And then I remember my next test, it's like, dude, you made $1 million. Like, you going to go give $100,000 this month? Like, I've had that. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to go do that. And by the way, my tax rate's really high now at this point, but it's like, no, this is what I'm going to do. Hey, the church has a need. We're going to go build a building. We're going to go do this. Can you contribute? What will you do? And, every step of the way, it's like, it's always a new test. But, God promises us that those he can trust with a little, he'll trust with much. Yeah. And, at the Kingdom Summit, I talked about the story of the parable of the talents and just how, so many people are asking for more. They're asking for more responsibility. They're ready and they want to do it. And I'm like, you ain't ready. God gives based upon your talent. So if you don't have what you think you deserve, it's because you haven't passed the test yet. Like, clearly, that's what the parable of the talents is all about. He's like, he gave based upon their skill. And my skill 10 years ago was not my skill today. He gave me very little, but I was faithful with very little, and he kept testing me with a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And every step of the way, I don't want to say I've been perfect by any means, but, clearly, he's like, all right, dude, I can trust you. And we'll see where it leads. I don't know.
Yeah. That's so good, man. Great breakdown in it all. And the Bible verse I coach on the most probably is Parable of the Talents, because it's so true. Because how many people are in that spot? Because it wasn't like the last person was an axe murderer, right? Or wasn't a weed dealer, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, he was just keeping it cool, right? And I think that's where the devil wants us all, just in that lukewarm spot, that middle ground where we just are just hanging out. So then we're not in the rock bottom, because if we get to rock bottom, chances are we'll do something about it, right? And I love how you said you don't know what you're asking for. The answer's probably going to be no on this, but do you watch The Chosen at all? Because
I've seen a couple episodes, but I haven't watched a ton of it now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I only say no just because you told me no to every other book.
I know. I don't watch a ton of it now, but I've heard it's great.
It's super good. I mean, we watch it with our kids. They're 16 and 13, so it gives them a better view of Jesus.
We watch Superbook because my kids are young. You ever watch Superbook? It's freaking like this animated cartoon with all the Bibles. It's The Chosen, but for like super young kids. Okay. So I've seen every episode of Superbook 1,000 times.
But that's awesome. Better than Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
Oh, yeah. But they still watch that, too.
But there was a scene in the new season of The Chosen where John was asking, he was like, hey, we want to sit at the right hand of the side, the left and the right.
Him and James.
And James, yeah. And then and Jesus, and in the cool part about In The Chosen, right, it's, action and, fiction, it's probably some fictional to a certain extent, but Jesus got frustrated. Like, he dropped his bag and he was looking like, you don't know what you're asking for. Can you drink from the cup that I'm drinking from?
Yeah.
Like, we can. He's like, you will, but like, he was basically telling you will, but you're not ready.
You're going to be martyred.
Yeah. For that. And so I know for so many times over my history, when I first was an entrepreneur, or even when we started this business, and we've been trustworthy, but it's been that growth, and it's been slower than I think we all want at times and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. But it was the being able to be trusted with little, to be trusted with many. And every time I wanted those big leaps, I was not personally ready for it. I would have crumbled had I got it right now, right? But like, had like I interviewed you 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been ready for that position. I'm ready for that position now, you know what I'm saying? So I just love when Jesus said, like, you know, it's like what you said about that. We're praying, lots of times we're praying for, we're just not ready for it yet. So we think God's like just not blessing us, or he's not hearing us. He's like, well, man, I'm not setting you up for failure. Let me give you what you actually need in those other moments, you know?
Yeah. And I think too, like, I love the parable of the talents because there's a part of it that people always miss, you know? And so for like those listening, right? I mean, the parable goes like this. The master was, you know, he left, you know, his estate to these 3 servants, and he gave them, you know, these talents, aka let's just call it money, based upon their skill. And he said, hey, you know, I want you to go invest it. So he gave one guy 1 talent, one guy 2 talents, another guy 5 talents. So clearly the guy with 1 was the worst at investing. The guy with 2 was decent, and the guy with 5 was the best. And he said, go invest it, make a return. I'll be back to see what you guys did. And so he comes back, and the guy with 5 turned it into 10. The guy with 2 turned it into 4. The guy with 1 buried it because he was scared of losing it. He was scared of his master. And, you know, master comes up to the 5 guy, and he was like, dude, you killed it. Great job. Goes to the 2. He's like, amazing. Great work. The guy with 1, he's like, dude, you're wicked. Like, I told you, like, you could have put it with the bank at least, and it would have been better. You chose to do nothing with it. Like, you're done. And so what's interesting about that story is he ends up taking the guy's 1 and gave it to the guy with 10. The guy who had 5 and turned it into 10 now has 11. And you think about this story because the guy with 5 earned somewhat his 5. You know, he was given the 5, and then he made 5 more. But then he got 1 he didn't earn. It was just purely given to him out of obedience. And I think about that a lot with my life. It's like I've been given so much that I did not earn. There's things I've earned. I've worked hard. I've, you know, done things. I've taken risk. I've done all that. But God, at the very beginning of it all, gave me my natural talent and ability. And, you know, my athleticism, my mind, my look, whatever, right? Like there's a lot he gave me. And he's like, dude, I think you could be a 5-talent guy. That's what I call him. You could be a 5-talent guy. Let's see what you do with it. Because even though you could be given all the natural talent in the world, doesn't mean you're going to use it, right? Okay, great. You actually used it and you doubled it. You know what? I'm actually just give you even more now, even though you didn't even do anything to deserve it. I'm going to give you another one. And then you got people who, look, quite frankly, right? They're 1-talent people. God didn't make everyone unique. Or sorry, he made everyone unique, but he didn't make it fair. Okay? Like there's the verse talking about how, who are you to decide what the potter wants to do with the clay? Yeah. Potter can make the clay however he wants. So some people are going to be more talented than others. Doesn't mean you can't use what you were given. You might have been given a tough stake where, you know, you didn't have a dad. You grew up in a broken home. You grew up in the hood. You know, you had all these things against you, and you see people every day figure out how to rise above it, right? And then they earn more. They don't have all the natural ability. I saw this in sports all the time. You know, there's this athletic specimen of a human that has they run, they hit, they freaking have a cannon, they got it all. And then all of a sudden, like, they blow it. And then you see some, like, little grinder just freaking crush it and figured it out. So it's like, no one has excuse. Yes, life's not fair. Some people are born into better situations with more natural talent than anything else. But at the end of the day, if you don't do anything with it, you know, God doesn't look favorably on it. And he's going to give your stuff away to somebody who will.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so well said, because we all are chosen, right? Like it's spoken so many times in the Bible about us. You know, God had a plan for us before we were even in the womb, right? He said he knows us, and then Ephesians talks about being chosen. And you're right. Like I think that because of society or Instagram or any things like that, right? Like somebody wants to be the next influencer, maybe they want to be the next Ryan Pineda, or they want to be the next Michael Jordan. Those weren't the talents that those person was given. God needs them to be the cog in the wheel over here. He doesn't need 3 quarterbacks on the team. He needs the wide receiver and the offensive lineman. They're trying to be the quarterback, right, on the team instead of going over here. And so then they're playing comparison. So God's not going to bless them over there because he needs you over here. So if he blesses you over here, then the order is out where he needs you. And so people get so much stuck in that instead of realizing, what are my natural talents and gifts? What am I really good at? And go and run in that area. And then you'll feel like you're fulfilled, because then now you're really killing it in those areas. What I love about the parable of the talent, and I've heard a spin on this of it before, was that the last guy who did nothing with his talent was still probably in proximity of the other two guys and could have went into him and been like, hey, man, what are you doing to double up yours?
Yeah.
Like, got some coaching from him. Like, hey, man, I don't know what, I'm dropping the ball here. Been humble.
Yeah.
And like, dude, I see you killing it. I'm not, apparently. What are you doing? Got coaching, right? Where would you say, I mean, obviously, a lot of these things you're saying, natural gifts and talents, you've just kind of known the Lord. How much has mentorship in your life played a part to be where you're at today?
Yeah, I think it's always a combination of both, right? They got this saying that, like, hard work beats talent every time, right? I forget what the saying is in sports, but it's like, I'm like, it's like half true. Like at the end of the day, once again, people are born with more talent than others, but I do think that people can progress their talent. So actually, if this is not biblical, but this is something I think, is that even with that story, I think that the one talent person could have became a two talent person, right? If they would have just did a good job with their one, they would have had two. Now, guess what? Your next opportunity, hey, you got two. What are you going to do with two? Can you turn two into four? Okay, now you're a four guy. Can you turn four into eight? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's kind of how life goes. Some people just start with way less, and they have way more room to keep going and evolve, whereas some people start with way more. Dude, you're already a 5-talent guy. Mm-hmm. With all your natural ability, let's see what you do. Oh, you turned into 10? All right, turn the 10 into 20. Let's see what happens, right? So I just think some people start at different points. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, how do you keep getting better and improving and everything else? Well, it is going to take mentorship. There's no other way around it. You don't just get better by yourself. You get better through fellowship, through mentorship, through discipling other people. You get better from, like I said, fellowship is hanging around other successful people, especially if you're trying to grow as a faith-driven business person, like hanging around faith-driven business people, because we think differently than normal business people. That's something I've had to really guard my mind against as I've gotten into this new world of like knowing everyone, So it's like most business people on social media are not Christian. Most of the big ones, I should say. And that's just the reality, and it sucks. And, I know most of those people, and hopefully, one day they give their life to the Lord, and all I can do is try to be a light around them, and, hopefully they see something in me that sparks interest in Jesus and everything else, right? But I have to guard myself against them and take the things that I think are applicable to me and my business and the things that don't align with what, God's word says. And that's where you got to have also this other side of the coin of mentors and pastors and other people in your life who are, maybe they don't understand the business side, but they understand that side. And this side's far more powerful. Like, once again, it goes back to, if you fear the Lord and obey his commands, you will have wealth anyway. You'll have those things anyway. And so my mentors and everyone else that I really lean on are more so on that side.
Yeah, so good. I mean, we have to protect our circle, right? Like, I know for me, and sometimes maybe I get this wrong, but like, I will not, I don't want to say I won't take wisdom or advice from people who don't have a relationship with Christ, but it's very hard for me to take wisdom and advice from them, because I know when you're speaking, I'm like, hey, you're like just what we said with like our wives trusting us. I know you're in the Word, right? I know you're at church. I know you have mentors in your life, so I can be like, you know what, you're probably right. Whereas if I'm getting it from a secular person, God bless them, they might be savages in business or fitness, but whatever they're trying to pour into my life, I'm not sure if they're really coming from the right source, right? Because half the time I'm coaching, and I mean, I don't know, especially for you, because I always pray before calls, like, God, allow your words to be my words. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden I'm spitting something that I'm like, where did this come from? You know?
Yeah.
And so I trust it so much more. It's why I have to guard my inner circle so closely with the right people, so I'm not led astray, even if it's just 1 degree off, right? Like we're talking about that guy who says don't tithe. Dude claims to be a Christian, used to be a pastor, like all these things. But he says that, right? Like now you're getting leadership from somebody who's like close to what you want to be, but is 1 degree off. Now he's going to lead your plane completely hundreds of miles off course, right? So I love that you said you have to have those in your life on those areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I was talking to one of my partners, his name's Brian. He recently was saved about 9 months ago. And he's on fire for the Lord, and dude, it's an amazing thing because I've known him for like 6 years now, and like, he's been around it, and then finally it took a big event for him to, really submit, right? It's hard for a rich guy because he's rich. But him and I were talking yesterday, and he was like, bro, how did you know, like all this stuff was going to happen. Because I've been saying that a lot of things were going to happen with the real estate market, with the education market. I mean, you're in the education business. I tell people this all the time. I'm like, dude, the education game is changing drastically. Everyone I know is getting killed. And I was telling them about 6 months ago that it was going to happen. I was like, I think almost everyone, I would guess 80% of education guys are going to be out of business by the end of 2024. And we've already, kind of seen a lot of it halfway through the year. And he was like, how did you know? And I was like, well, I think I knew because the principle of being 1 degree off, if you can see that things are like 1 degree off, and this takes true wisdom and discernment, and you can see they're off course and they're not course correcting or finding this solution or the answer. Now I'm talking business, not faith or anything at this point. But I was like, I could see that everything had changed in the business side of things as far as conversions, people, customer, just like tendencies, the economy, all these things, right? So I could tell that this was changing, but nobody was pivoting with it. They were still running the same thing. And so when you see this happening in month 1, I'm like, there's a gap here that never existed before. The gap is widening, nothing's changing. I'm like, this inevitably goes way off track. Mm-hmm. And, I changed my whole business to go now with what, the sentiment is. And you have to do that in all business or you're out of business, right? But basically, you just reminded me of that, talking about the 1 degree thing, because it's so true. Like, if you don't recognize that you're 1 degree off path early, you look up and it's already too late. Mm-hmm. You're already down this rabbit hole, whether it's out of business, whether it's committing adultery. The 1 degree with lust starts with Instagram. Yep. Then it turns into porn. Then it turns into this. And all of a sudden you're like, how the heck did this happen? It's like, well, bro, you didn't catch yourself right here.
Yeah, 100% right. The Bible says, lust is the same thing as adultery, right? Anger is the same thing as murder, right? And it's like, well, but it's like, it's exactly what you said. It will lead there. If we entertain that, it's going to keep turning into the things if we don't correct it on the very first thing, right?
Yeah, and it's not even like that all of a sudden you can just stay there doing that. It never is that.
Yeah.
It's always keeps getting more extreme and you keep getting further away from where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think one final question that I have, because I don't want to take up all your time here, brother, is that, over the years, since I know obviously it's a high-level husband podcast, I think it's so fired about faith, and things like that. I mean, but as you know, to be an amazing husband, like, dude, it's rooted in faith, is over the years, my wife was never my number 1 counsel in my life. One, as we've talked about earlier, because A, my habits wasn't being a great leader. B, I always say she's my favorite transformation, and same thing with her habits and actions and things wasn't that there. But would you now, and dude, I've spent an insane amount of money these past 4 years on coaching and things like that, money well spent, but still to this day I have coaches, right? But my wife's, at the end of the day, my number 1 counsel, primarily because, like I said, watching her habits every single day, be rooted in the word. Where's your wife at with, like, would you say that that's the same situation for you, that you guys are, like, just locked, where it's like, man, like, she is the submission. We have the same vision. We're pulling in the same direction. If I have something, I'm being vulnerable and bringing it to her, like, I'm struggling in this, or I'm thinking about this, I'm doing that. Would you say she's your number 1 counsel?
I think it depends on the thing. I've counseled a lot of husbands and wives, and I'll give an example. Somebody we're counseling was struggling with lust and porn, and their wife caught him, and all these things. And his wife wanted him to be, like basically what you're talking about, of like, hey, every time you think about lust, anytime you've done it, like, I want you to do this with me and that with me. Like, I want to be that person that holds you accountable. And I was just like, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that that's going to be healthy for your marriage. I don't think you want that responsibility. I think that he needs to come to someone like me, and we figure those things out. And, so that's just like one example where I think that I would have a tough time to the level of accountability that his wife was looking for in that situation. Now, that being said, I do believe that people need to confess and repent and do all those things. So if you do, do something that is wrong and everything else, I do think you're going to hold that guilt and shame until you confess it to the one you've wronged. And so if it's your wife, then it's your wife that you've wronged. And I think for men, it's that lust one that is the hardest one.
Yeah.
When it comes to like business and everything else, my wife's obviously aware of things we do, but even with her, she's like, like, I support whatever you want to do. Like, it's all good. Like, so we've had this relationship from the beginning where she doesn't really question anything I decide to do in business. If I tell her that this is what I feel like we need to do, she has enough trust and discernment to say, yeah, I mean, that's what you think. Like, let's go. So I lean on kind of other people on business things of like ideas and things I'm testing. And my wife also knows that that's part of the process. So like before I ever come to her with this idea, I've already fleshed it out and gone through these things. And I'm like, hey, babe, this is what we're going to do. And she just kind of knows like, this is not something I just thought of yesterday. This is something like if I'm coming to her and I'm saying I'm going to do this, then it's going to happen. Because I don't ever say I'm going to do things that don't happen. I'll throw things out there. I'll be in here. I'll be like, what would you guys think if we did this? And they'll be like, oh, well, this would be this. This would be this. And like, that's a decent idea. Well, then it could be like this. And I'll be like, I'll flesh it out. Then I'll come back another week and I'll be like, okay, what if it went down like this? And they'll be like, actually, that could be pretty decent. And then I'll start building it out. And by then I'm like, all right, this is what it's going to be. And then, we do it. So there's a process for business on that front. I think on the spiritual side of things, my accountability is to just different pastors and mentors in my life where, there's deep theological questions that I have that I need guidance on. And I know that, even though my wife is very good, she's not at their level. And so, I lean on them for things like that. So I think she plays a role in certain things. Like when it comes to our family and our kids and everything else, there's nobody else that I lean on other than her. I could ask my pastor, I could ask other brothers, and, maybe I'll do that, but she's going to have the most authority for what we decide on that.
So good, dude. And I just love how you said you bring it to her.
Yeah.
Saying even though we may still do the thing, we still bring it to them, right? Like, and that's so huge, right? Because they want to feel like they're a part of the process rather than like, oh, get back in the kitchen and do your thing. It's like, well, no, like bring it to them. I love how you did that.
Yeah, and let me give you a great example. This actually was a tough one. I went to my wife last week or 2 weeks ago maybe, and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about selling our home. And, she's like, okay, like why? And, for us, for her, it's not completely out of the blue because we've literally for the last 10 years, like traded homes every 2 to 3 years. Because I just will buy a home, we'll live in it for 2 years, flip it, make a bunch of money, do it again. So I've always found the next home. So it's not like this is the fifth time I've had this conversation with her in 10 years of marriage, maybe even more. So she's like, okay, why? Like, but what's it look like? And I'm like, well, here's why I think we should do it. I gave like 4 different reasons. Because I know that now that we have 3 kids and everything else, like it is going to be a much harder thing to do and move versus when we were just us and, going from one place to the next. And also, too, in the fact that we don't necessarily have to do it like we did before. Before it's like, no, we gotta sell this house and we got to get that money and that's going to help this grow forward. Versus this is just like, I just think it's a better decision with the economy, with other opportunities that I could use the money for, with just lots of stuff. There's different reasons I could go into. But long story short, it's not her preference to do it. And in fact, she's probably hoping it doesn't sell because it's a make me move kind of price. It's not like oh, dude, this is market value. It's like, no, this is what we're going to list it for. And if somebody wants to pay it, let's go. And if they don't, then, it's all good. Like we'll just keep living here and it's great. And then, we'll reevaluate 6 months later if it didn't sell and see where things stand.
Dude, so good. We had a very similar situation last summer, whereas for years, my wife and she would tell you this, she was the no person. Like I couldn't buy a TV, do anything with it. I couldn't even get the sentence out of my mouth before it was a no. I had built up no equity in the things, not because I necessarily wasn't a man of my word. I just hadn't done it right. And last summer, we were on a walk, and she stopped me and she turned and looked at me and she was just like, you could do whatever you want and it's a yes from me, which was super as empowering as a man, right? Like,
Yep.
man, like my wife fully trusts. But then a few months later, had a very similar conversation where I was like, babe, I think maybe we should sell our house, take the equity, do this, this, and this, and blah, blah, blah. And she was, dude, this is like her dream house, like dream
Yeah.
area. You heard where we moved from, poverty, like all this other thing. She doesn't want to at all, right? Like we're super comfortable. And she was like, if that's what you feel is best, then
Wow.
then that's okay. So I love that you said that as well, because man, I just want to give the men listening to this that's hope. If your wife's not there, like you just heard Ryan say, it's like a business partner, 6 years to come to get saved, right?
Yeah.
Whereas 6 years of being around a dude who's on fire for God, right? Like our wives in their own time will do that too. We just got to keep showing the fruit, as the Bible says, right?
Yeah.
The fruit.
And my wife, at every single one of our events, we do a like Q&A on stage. And that's one of the things that always comes up because it's a common problem. Like, especially because I teach people how to be entrepreneurs and real estate investors. And for a lot of men, their wife is not on board. And look, I get it, right? For a lot of men, maybe they're W-2 guys. And so just being an entrepreneur is like super just scary for everyone. There's no, consistent income from it. Whereas I would argue being W-2 is even scarier. But nonetheless, it's just a thing that we always talk about, with couples. And, with couples, every couple's different, right? But I always say, I'm like, hey, dudes, I call them, and this isn't very Christian, but it's a baseball term, I call them slapdicks. And it's just like, dude, if you're slapdick and like literally you just always are not doing what you say you're going to do, never following through, being one of these guys who has all these grand ideas but never does anything about it, that's what I call them. And, you're just like, this dude who just, like, I wouldn't trust you either. Like, your wife actually has great discernment to say, no, you shouldn't do this because your track record tells me you ain't going to follow through. So for those people, like, I get it. And I tell them, I'm like, look, obviously I would love to sell you into coaching, and I think we could help you out a ton. If you guys have never had support and coaching and everything else, obviously that's going to increase your chances. But I still don't know if you're going to do what it takes, But I know your chances will go up by working with us, but there's no guarantees you're going to actually go do deals and whatever else, right? Because that's going to be on you. But then, there are guys who really do, they're doing great, but their wives are very cautious, and that's just their personality. They're not there yet with those things. And so that's where my wife comes into play a lot, where she kind of just talks about that. And she's like, look, I'm here to support Ryan. We wouldn't be where I'm at if I nagged him every decision he made or made him come to me with every decision he wants to make. And, has Ryan failed along the way? Absolutely. He's done many failures, but through those failures, he's had many, many success that far outweigh the failures. And so I understand that not everything's going to go 100%. And you guys do too. You guys got to understand that you're going to make an investment. You're going to go do these things. And guess what? You'll lose money on a flip. You're going to have a deal that doesn't work out. It's going to be a nightmare. But guess what? If you just do the right things over and over again, it's going to be okay. Yeah. And so it just takes time.
Yeah. It's how you handle those failures, right? Because like if we lose money on a flip or something else happens, it's how you respond to those, right? And treating your spouse, right? Like so if you lose this money, all of a sudden you're a wreck, right? Your mood's out of the place and you're taking it out on her. You're getting defensive. You're putting her down. Well, yeah, now not only are you somewhat failing in that thing, even though it's a lesson, she doesn't like what could possibly come. But if you fail and you still love and you still are doing all the proper things, she's going to trust you and be like, all right, this last time you failed, but you didn't take it out on me and the kids. You still did it. So it wasn't a super bad thing that happened. So I don't want that. Not that you failed on the deal is a big of a deal. I don't like the repercussion of how you treated me because of that.
100%. Yep. And so once again, that goes back to your track record as a husband, as a man, and everything else. It's like my track record is good through good times, bad times, everything else, for how I treat my family and my wife. And so, she has trust in the decisions I make. But it's not something that was just given. I earned it all these years.
Yeah.
You talked about equity. People say making deposits. Yeah, like, respect isn't like this given thing. Like, it's earned.
Yeah. 100%. Man, we could talk forever on male leadership, man. I respect your time. I thank you so much for coming on here. Dude, whatever you got going on right now, I mean, I think the thing I'm most obviously excited about that you got going on is the whole Wealthy Kingdom movement that you're doing.
Yeah.
Man, plug it, talk about it, whatever you want to do, man.
Yeah. I mean, you were at our Kingdom Summit. That was our first big event for Wealthy Kingdom. We had almost 1,000 people there, and it was an amazing experience. For the 2-minute plug of Wealthy Kingdom is it's a nonprofit that I started, so I don't make anything from it. My mission is to launch 1,000 Bible studies worldwide for entrepreneurs. Right now we're over 50, and so that's great. Bible study has changed my life. I've watched it change others' lives. I've been doing it for 8 years straight now, every week. And that's just part of what's built my foundation. So it's built my group of people, and we started it because just churches don't have it. It just doesn't exist, for entrepreneurs. And if they do, it's for a season. So ours is always ongoing. Would love for, anyone listening to join one. They're all free. You could lead one if you're ready. That'd be amazing too. We're going to have other events throughout the year. So, the Kingdom Summit, which you went to, I'm going to be doing these things called Kingdom Nights, where we're going to travel across the country at different local churches and throw these big business and faith events. So that's going to be exciting. And yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch more, but like for me, my mission is that the entrepreneurs and business people are neglected, and they're the ones that can make the most impact. Mm-hmm. It's like there's no shortage of ministries that are there to help the widows and the orphans and the sex trafficked and all those things, and that's great. Like I'm not discouraging any of that, but there are very few that are helping the people that Jesus said are the hardest to get into heaven. And so for me, I think that's an issue, and I'm in it every day, and I see it's an issue every day. I see families destroyed. I see all this opportunity that if you just impact the entrepreneur, that trickle-down effect happens to all of their employees in their company. That person can give more to their local church. Like everything changes if you can get that one person. And so, God put it on my heart as a guy who has authority in this space from a standpoint of just pure business to business. Take faith out of the equation. I have the authority to talk to these guys. And, I'm using it to go show them the truth, show them what true wisdom looks like. And so for anybody who's interested in that, everything, is free. Obviously people can give and donate. I got to do a better job at that, at, promoting it more to grow on the donation front. But anybody can come for free. Just go into wealthykingdom.com.
And it's not just for entrepreneurs, right? Like, so if you're not an entrepreneur, you can be in
business people, anyone can be in it, right?
Yeah.
Anybody in business.
Sweet.
Yep.
Man, I love that mission. So thank you, brother, for doing that. Thanks for all you're doing for the kingdom. And thanks for leading the family and yourself the way that you do, man. We're definitely taking notice and appreciate it, brother.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. God bless you.
Awesome.